paradigm. It's a very different paradigm in how we plan bus routes, how we plan bus operations from the time when diesel was, gave us a lot more flexibility. But electric is the way to go. And I think the big challenge or the big, thing that we have to learn as we go forward is how do we plan our routes? How do we plan our charging locations? These things have to be planned in a lot more detail with electric than they could be done with diesel. But we have a very rich knowledge base in the group that is here, and I think we'll hear a lot more about that as we go along. It will be amiss if I don't mention the kind of very active role, very active coordinating role that the NITI Aayog has been playing in this. My compliments to Mr. Sinha particularly, because this is one sector where I feel that multiple ministries of the government of India really have to come together. And unless you have someone who's able to provide that cohesion, these things don't happen. That's the lead that we're getting from the NITI Aayog. Both Mr. Sinha and Randhir are really providing that support. But let me not spend more time on this, and look forward to the very rich discussions during this. Back to you, Aparna.
Thank you, sir. I'd request everyone to mute themselves when not talking. And with that, I would like to invite our keynote speaker for the day, Shri Sudhendu Jyoti Sinha, Advisor, Infrastructure, Connectivity and Electric Mobility at NITI Aayog. Mr. Sinha has been instrumental in driving the whole conversation of electric mobility in India. And we have had multiple conversations, insightful conversations with Mr. Sinha. So it's always, it is always exciting to hear him speak. So over to you, Sinha sir.
Okay, thank you, Aparna. Thanks to Mr. Agrawal and all other officials of WRI. Probably it's always a team effort, you see. A particular organization, a particular institution should not be taking all that credit. It is always a team effort. We do have a lot of learnings, and you will appreciate that in the present dispensation, one thing is established, that there is a change, there is a visible change in the mindset of the government officials, that they are not the repository of the wisdom alone. It can stay from anywhere, and we should rather be more forward-looking to see that wherever it is, it should be brought into our policy perspectives. And that is why need for so many stakeholder consultations, so many discussions with institutions like WRI, number of them, so that whatever learnings we have, it can be embedded into the new policy. The existing policy could be recalibrated. Yes. Now, buses are, of course, one of the most significant segment in India. As far as manufacturing is concerned, we are second in the world. And as far as patronage is also concerned, it is a very, very high patronage is there in India. Probably the per passenger, per kilometer cost is the least when it comes to buses as far as surface transport, other than railways is concerned. Then it is the least probably. And it is time that we go in for its electrification in a big way. It should be based on battery electric mobility. Because of its sheer size and its frequency and the patronage, the large scale patronage, it is needed that we go in for electric mobility of buses. Now, the recent PM scheme has been re-strategized. We thought through and we decided that it's time we don't go in for thin spread of resources. It should be more focused, more identified, so that visibility and optics is more there. That's why we decided that we should have a kind of lighthouse cities. And then therefore we identified all these 4 million plus cities, 9 of them, in which Ahmedabad is also there. So we decided these are there where we should go in and intervene, and we should see to it that most of the buses, most of the public transport units are from the government. And of course, Mahua Acharya is there. She's from CSL, ESL, CSL. They are also collaborating with us to take it forward. That is one spectrum of running these buses. But these things can never function well until we have got a very intense team kind of formation and going ahead on the team. Because the role of municipal authorities, other local bodies, DISCOMs, the land authorities, it's a kind of that sort of approach has to be there. Then only we can succeed on this front. And we are definitely aspirational. We want to take it forward in a big way so that the bus mobility gradually transforms into a kind of electric mobility. And we are working through charging infrastructure, all the constraints, whatever we can identify, and whatever other elements of ecosystem are there, we are working. WRI is also cooperating with CSL, ESL, and other bodies, and trying to see through that how exactly this can be achieved at a faster pace. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those powerful words. And with that, I would request Mr. Rohan Modi, who is advisor to me Electric Bus Mission. Mr. Modi, I hand it over to you to introduce the TUMI Electric Bus Mission in India to our stakeholders. Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much, Aparna. Unfortunately, I'm unable to share my screen, so
let me share it.
Yeah.
Can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, thank you. So I completely agree to all the points which Mr. Shudhendu and O.P. Agarwal mentioned, and I think maybe it's a very good step to take this presentation right after the talk of Mr. Shudhendu, because some of the things are completely in line with what he said. So yes, what is TUMI eBus Mission? So TUMI eBus Mission is one of the global efforts, global initiatives, which was launched at the UNSG Summit in September 2019. It is also known as ACT Initiative, and it is one of the 12 critical initiatives which is being implemented by 6 coalition members. Next slide, please. With support of Federal Ministry of Development and Economic Cooperation, Germany. Yes. So, what are the objectives of TUMI eBus Mission? The main objective of TUMI eBus Mission is to support 20 deep dive cities at a global level, wherein 5 will be the Indian cities. Establish a Menti-City network of around 100 cities by November 2022, wherein we aim to select around 20 cities from India. One of the objectives of this Menti-Cities is to establish a peer-to-peer learning network between the deep dive cities, to whom the TUMI eBus Mission will be supporting a deep dive technical assistance table, and further inspire around 500 cities until 2025, and to ensure procurement readiness of around 100,000 e-buses by 2025. But how do we do it? Sounds very ambitious. And I'll try to explain. For the deep dive cities, there are the 2 main steps which we envisage here. The first one is the coalition building, wherein we aim to develop a coalition of around all the relevant stakeholders at international level, as well as at local level within the 20 deep dive cities, which will be established and prepared to support the deep dive cities towards mass adoption of e-buses. As a second step, we will be developing e-bus targets for these deep dive cities, and subsequently a detailed work plan, which includes a detailed technical assistance tailored plan for each of the 20 deep dive cities. And to scale it up to around 500 cities, or when I say inspire 500 cities, that is, we prepare for the scaling operation, wherein first we aim to identify the cohort of the Menti cities. Subsequently, we'll be developing a detailed mentorship guidebook and training workshops for this Menti cities at around core topics like e-bus planning, procurement, and operation. So which are the 20 deep dive cities? The cities which are mentioned in bold, that are around 9 cities, they are already on board officially on the TUMI e-bus mission. And there are 5 Indian cities with which we are aiming to work, and these are the cities of Delhi, Chennai, Mumbai, Bengaluru, and Ahmedabad. And I'm very happy to share that these are the very cities which aim to support or wherein the Ministry of Heavy Industries, India, is also aiming to support through the FAME scheme, which is recently amended. So what's in for the deep dive cities? The deep dive cities gets a detailed technical assistance plan and yes, a long-term e-bus adoption roadmap. But simultaneously, deep dive cities will also commit to define ambitious and time-bound e-bus targets. They'll be committing to act as a mentor to the Menti cities within the region. That is, the Indian deep dive cities will be mentoring the Indian cities as well the global cities. And they will be disseminating the good practices, experiences gained through their journey at a global and regional level. And how do we set up this ambitious 500 city program? So as a first step, we aim to develop the local regional level Menti city network, which are around 5 of them: Latin America, Brazil, Africa, Asia, and India. And then we connect these Menti city network to form a global knowledge hub of TUMI e-bus mission. So what's in there for the Menti cities? The Menti cities, they get access to regional pool of experts, which will be hired within the TUMI e-bus mission. They get an opportunity of peer-to-peer learning platform, wherein all these cities, all these networks will be connected on one single platform, and active exchange between each of the cities will be supported. And the Menti cities will get access to the regional and national level training programs within each of these Menti city network. But how do we do it? So the first, next slide, please. Yes, as I said, we link all these 5 Menti city networks, and we set up a global knowledge platform for peer-to-peer learning. And what are the topics around this are? Next slide, please. Yeah. The main topics in the Global Knowledge Hub will be procurement, monitoring, financing, charging infrastructure implementation, and digitization. And finally, we'll be onboarding the regional pool of experts, like I said, and each of the deep dive cities will have access to these deep dive cities as well as the Menti cities. And how do we do this? So which coalition members will be working in Indian deep dive cities? So we had tried to allocate this different roles of coalition building, technical assistance plan, and scaling in India to among the different coalition members, which includes WRI, C40, UITP, ICLEI, and ITDP. So yes, that's all from my side. And yeah, please feel free to reach us out for more details on TUMI e-bus mission.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohan, for that overview of TUMI electric bus mission. And I mean, we look forward to working with the 5 cities and other mentee cities as part of the TUMI electric bus mission in India, and reach, and also the peer-to-peer learning with global cities. So with that, we enter into our segment of panel discussion. So just before we start with the discussion where Madhav will be moderating, I will take a quick 2 minutes to set the context for the panel discussion today. Can you see my screen? Pawan, can you confirm?
Yes, Aparna, go ahead.
Yeah. So looking at the current status of electric bus deployment in India, what we have seen is that we have around 6,690 buses which are sanctioned under FAME scheme with an overlay of around 10,000 buses. But since the FAME scheme was launched in 2015, there are around 1,100 buses which are operational right now, and of which a third of these buses are MIDI electric buses. So what we see is a gap of around, only 20% of the electric buses sanctioned have been deployed till date. Therefore, we need to gauge these barriers and also identify those factors which can help scaling up of electric buses while we use the opportunity of electric bus procurement as as an opportunity to improve and upgrade the public transport stock in India. So this is a forecast of electric bus sales penetration, where we see that by 2030, with the with the current stock of total public sector buses, we would be requiring around 1 lakh, and this is not factoring in the requirement of electric buses to satisfy the public transport demand in India, which will take this number to even higher. So this is based on the assumption that around 40% of the buses in 2030 would be electric. So which this high demand accentuates the need to understand the barriers for electric bus adoption, and what are some of the strategies that has been put in use right now, and what are the challenges and issues that we might face and we will be facing to achieve this kind of electric bus penetration in India. So the key factors for electric bus adoption. So right now we have seen the FAME to the partial modification of FAME 2, where 9 cities have been identified for aggregating the electric bus demand, which has been used as a strategy to bring down the high capital cost of electric buses, procuring electric buses. So the key question is, to understand what are some of the challenges and issues which are perceived by STUs for demand aggregation. How is demand aggregation different from business as usual, which we have seen with ICE buses? So again, when we talk about demand aggregation, the next point is, when the demand is aggregated, how do we fund this electric bus demand? I mean, if we are looking at 10,000 or 100,000 electric buses by 2030, what are the opportunities? Can we look at pooled financing for electric buses? How do we look at accessing bilateral funds or even internal convergence funds for funding these electric buses? And once we have the funding mechanisms in place, what are some of the innovative financing mechanisms that we can leverage for procuring electric buses at scale? And once we have, the funding financing in place, then we also need to look at how, how is the supply chain ready? How is the supply chain positioned to deliver these required electric buses? So this is something that the industry will be able to answer. So these three key questions are what we pose to the panelist today. And we have a very eminent panel of STUs, of research and academic agencies, and the industry who have agreed to be part of this panel. And with that, I would hand it over to Madhav to take the conversation forward.
Thank you very much, Aparna, and I think you very well articulate. The fact is that I think some very simple back of the envelope calculations clearly show that we need to reduce the cost by say 20-25%, and by aggregating demand, we may be able to achieve that. So if we are to aggregate the demand, then these are the three broad questions that come about, right? So one is, the challenges, what are the opportunities, challenges that the STUs perceive? So we have some representation from there. The opportunities for pooling or bringing together financing at lower rates, etc., so that we are able to lower the costs. And then finally, whether the industry or the supply chain is ready to be able to deliver. So we have stakeholders representing each of these groups. So I think what we will try to do is get some reflections from each of you on sort of just broadly what we have raised, if these seem to be the right type of questions, and and then based on sort of who you represent, what do you see as the key issues. So today we'll start with Mr. Shri Ashish Kundra. He is the Principal Secretary for Transport, Government of Delhi. Mr. Ashish, so what do you perceive as, if we were to, if you were to participate in a demand aggregation kind of a thing with some of the other cities, what do you see this as a good opportunity? What are the kind of buses would Delhi think about? And what are some of the challenges you might perceive with this? Maybe if you can just share some thoughts, or if you have some other thoughts that you would like to sort of respond to the broader context that was set for this conversation. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think Delhi has got a peculiar situation vis-a-vis the rest of the country. We made a transition to CNG buses more than a decade ago. And because of various court regulations and all that, Delhi firstly is obliged to get low floor buses. It's a requirement which is peculiar to Delhi. And while other cities or states may or may not go for it, but we have to go for low floor buses. So that is one thing which kind of sets it apart from the aggregation box slightly, because I don't know how many cities will opt for low floor electric buses. That's one. The second is that in the OPEX model, what we have seen is that while the OEMs, the supply side issue you have flagged, that what is their readiness to supply so many buses. But there is a challenge in getting operators who are willing to take the risk to partner with OEMs to kind of form an SPV to operate these buses, because it is not the OEMs themselves who are doing it. Some companies are forming, for instance, the Tatas are forming their own subsidiaries which are into operating business, but typically the bus manufacturers prefer if there is some other operator with whom they can tie up. And since this technology is new, that is the second challenge to my mind. The third thing I think which we need to acknowledge is the fact of the limitation of grid and the power availability, because electrification of depots is a crucial requirement for induction of electric buses in the fleet. And in cities with smaller depots and smaller load requirements, it is still doable. But when the load requirement, for instance, in Delhi goes beyond 4 megawatts, the DISCOM typically their time frame in which they can set up the supporting infrastructure shoots up from 6 months directly to 24 months, which means if I today tell them that I need 8 megawatt load in 6 locations, I can't do anything before 2 years. So that is another thing which has to be kept in mind. So either you go for smaller depots or a model which is a hybrid of CNG and use the depot space for, let us say, a hybrid kind of facility, part CNG and part electric. That is the other part. And I think in a city like Delhi, you know, we have an ambition of ultimately having 11,000 buses in the city. Right now, our bus fleet size is 6,500, and progressively the idea is to electrify the fleet. And you know, the transition from diesel kind of buses to CNG was also a difficult one because there were limitations of pumps and all that in the beginning. And in this case, the technology is changing very fast. The battery technologies are changing. And typically procurement now means you have bound yourself for long-term contracts of 10 years. And in the interim, if the technology and costs go down dramatically, in that case, you know, you're still stuck with a contract which is of old technology and maybe also limited range limitation. There are wide variations amongst OEMs of the kind of buses they are supplying, about the charging technologies that they are using. And this also poses a challenge of procurement on our side, because we are in a way comparing apples and oranges. So, you know, it becomes a difficult, you know, choice to make, especially when the range within a city also is more than 200 kilometers. Then whether to go for necessarily an overnight charging framework, or also introduce opportunity charging within that. And then, you know, most of the batteries are manufacturers are Chinese companies. And we don't know that in the peak summer conditions of Delhi and other northern cities, over time, how these things are performing. I'm happy to note in the graph which you put out that, you know, Pune has kind of taken the lead nationally in induction of electric buses. And I think there's a lot to learn. I mean, of course, we have recently finalized a contract of 300 electric buses. And we are also now coming out another bid of a similar number or slightly more than that. But I just flagged these issues which are, to our mind, very important issues for a forum like this to deliberate upon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think these are all very, very important questions you've raised, including sort of the constraint around the low floor buses, and then the other issues that you've raised around charging and etc. Thank you very much, sir. Next, I will go to Shri Mukesh Kumar, Municipal Commissioner, Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. So 2 questions for you. One, I think, you know, Ahmedabad has been, you know, one of the pioneers of doing these gross cost contracts, right? So one, you know, any reflections from your side on the gross cost contracting that might be useful? And then again, I think if you can also respond to this more broad question of, you know, what would you see as the opportunities or challenges to participate in a demand aggregation kind of, you know, conversation, and other broad challenges that you are seeing as you're thinking about electric buses?
Thank you. Ahmedabad, unlike what my batchmate, as he said about problems in Delhi, we've been in the cost contract model for a long, long time. Our own experience, specialist experience on adoption of e-buses and trying to reframe that in a gross cost model was a challenge. I was there during that point of time as commissioner in my earlier tenure. This is my second tenure again here. And really, in fact, we at that point of realized government funding the bus, or they want to fund the bus service. They're two key. You want to procure bus, or you want to procure the bus service. We have followed procurement of bus service independent of any funding model. Government want to buy buses, give it to local bodies, and we couple of years become very inefficient system, losses mounts up and the process services go down and public transport utilities go down. So we have always thought, let the bus operations and maintenance be done by private operator. Overall control should be done with local bodies, and we pay in terms of per kilometer rates and all the risk on in terms of bus, this technology especially. So here, while doing the gross cost contract for electric buses, we especially got the OEMs and manufacturer must be part of that consortium. Because we realize that technology is going to change very fast. There will be implication in terms of cost. As Ashish rightly said, why should we stuck for a long-term contract in a particular bus which is outdated? So if OEM is a part of that consortium, he will continue to upgrade the technology as per their technology change in the market, continue to bring more and more, and we are neutral in terms of such risk is taken care of by them. Then gross cost contract is still, FAM1 was locked. They didn't know how to procure the buses. I recall, I break my head with ministries trying to convince them to adopt gross cost contract model. They did not, and hardly 1,000 buses came into India at that point of time. Right now, we are running about 140 buses in Ahmedabad city. 60 have already come within next week or 10. Our fleet size will go to 200 buses, all on gross cost contract. We have got 2 OEMs as a part of consortium, Tata, JPM, and earlier 50 was with Ashok Leyland. So all big manufacturers, they are piloting their projects in Ahmedabad in terms of running the gross cost contract. Happy to know that FAM2 has again adopted the gross cost of contract model as a model contracting for all the cities in the country. Niti Aayog has been able to work out that document. But still, I believe the finer point should be left to the cities. India as a 2 big country, cities have too many their own localized issues to have a one model. But overall, under the umbrella of gross contract, it works very good. Our experience has been fantastic. At the same time, the state, and we know these are the models where we have got viability gap funding. So more and more help is given to local bodies, the more buses will be on the roads. The state losses will also be less. So we got a very interesting scheme. Apart from gross cost contract model, we have got a Chief Minister Urban Transport model, where the 50% of viability gap funding under the gross cost contract model is again borne by the state, thereby encouraging the local bodies to invest more and more in public transport in urban areas. Like electric bus, our viability gap funding is about 25 rupees per kilometer. So I take a burden of hit of 12.5 and hit taken by the government for a period of contract of 8 years, which is our GCC model in Ahmedabad. So there are very interesting models have been worked out. The opportunities are absolutely fantastic. Too many things can be worked out. All upgradation of fleet that we have, we are running around 1,000 buses in the city. We have already upgraded about 200 more, at 200 right now. And we continue to do in phases for next 3 to 4 years time, more than 70 to 80% fleet. As our earlier contract gets in, new contract gets into electric mode. At the same time, we have also quickly realized the issues of charging, etc., that we have sorted out in our bus depots, etc. We have also issue of last mile connectivity. As a local body, I'm not just looking as an STU, point-to-point connectivity. I'm also looking at last mile connectivity, where today and tomorrow, in fact, we're coming with a policy for public charging station for private vehicles. With the government has already come with a policy to give some subsidy to for running buying the private vehicles. So they get subsidy about a lakh on different categories of vehicles. So we are trying to make a grid of 3 km by 3 km in the city, where the local body AMC will aggregate locations for all the electric charging stations. And there are multiple players providing charging facilities for such private electric vehicles in the city. We have about 300 private vehicles right now, which we expect to multiply in next 1 year time. So back to back, local bodies will be again like, we don't take property tax, we give them some more incentive, we don't charge for the land, and so many things that vehicle tax again concession being given to such electric private vehicles. So back to back, we have a full package for multiplying our journey toward electrification. Thank you. Thank you for part of this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mukesh Kumar. Any just quick reflections on the demand aggregation question? Do you think that's something that seems like an opportunity?
Yeah, this will definitely help in bringing down the capital cost of acquisition. cities will have to look at the existing contract. When the contract is getting over, I can have a demand aggregation in phase wise. Like I add 200 this year, some contract is coming to end, and 3 more years later, I can have the demand aggregation can be done in one go. I would say it should be phases as per the current agreement getting over in due course of time. Some agreement were entered 4 years back, they will yet to take 4 years to get over. So it can't be just in one go all 1,000 buses through a process of demand aggregation become electric vehicle, because there are existing contracts already in the force right now. So it has to be at least I look at 5 years time. 2017-18 was the first FAM year. So look at 4 years. I think 4 more years we should demand aggregate in every year wise. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, you aggregate it and go for procurement. KMCs will be part of that. In fact, basic people have met us and we have been fine with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this phasing of contracting is also another interesting issue that you raised. So thank you very much. Now, next, I'm going to call upon Mr. Randir. He's the Director for Electric Mobility at NITI Aayog. Mr. Randir, I mean, any points to further add? You've very much been a part of this strategy. So any further points to add, and then any reflections on what the first two sets of comments that we've heard.
Thank you, Mr. Pai. And I mean, it was heartening to note a different type of model which Ahmedabad is deploying. And in addition to what FAME2, remodeled FAME2 has done, maybe I would start with something very, basic, and there are certain points which I would like people to ponder upon. So, in fact, the transport is not just how you get around. It is something that fundamentally shapes our towns, our cities, our health, and our whole quality of life. It can shape all these things for good and for bad. So somebody rightly said that we must make public transport, cycling and walking the natural first choice for all who can take. So if Mumbai fills a double-decker bus with motorists, then it's possible to remove 75 cars from the road. So what about bus? So in addition to the wider co-benefits that zero-emission buses can bring, we would expect zero-emission buses to achieve long-term operating cost savings also, which can be reinvested in more frequent services, lower fares, and other improvements for passengers. We all know that the changes done in remodeled FAME2 for bus segment and targeting the 4 million plus population cities now. So Indu sir also spoke about it. So the idea is to have a focused approach and deploy the resources initially to the places with maximum visibility and the impact. And from my side, I think some of the points which needs to be considered and pondered upon for zero emission public transport adoption are: first is the viability gap funding. It needs to be reduced through efficiency measures such as sound contracting, aggregation, and the better asset utilization. The next point I think which needs to be touched upon very greatly by the states also is the retrofitting. In fact, this would help in phasing out the current breed of the public buses. Third point is about the running the electric buses on the busiest routes, that is high frequency bus routes. This will serve dual purpose. First, operationally, it will be more viable. And second, it demonstrates the faith on technology to public when authorities deploy the infra to such routes. And in addition to this, we also needs to, whenever we are selling this to the operators, it's a TCO which needs to be sold. And better routes will impact the deployability. In fact, positive cash flow for operational perspective is to start with is the key. Next point is about the end mile connectivity with the main route intercity buses. This is important for end-to-end connectivity through the sustainable means. Fifth is, I think somebody already spoke about the model availability. We need more players in the market. Currently, we don't have much choice, and best of the names aren't investing enough in this segment. The current range availability is about 150 to 200 kilometers for the bus segment, 9 meter to 12 meter I'm talking about. This needs to be increased in line with the cars. In fact, for cars, we see that the range is available up to the 350, in fact, more than that also. And the improvement in other segments are also happening very fast. The learning curve is very steep in other cases. Regarding the infrastructure, we need to establish the infra at the depots with fast chargers and the intermittent charging points for halts up to the 30 minutes. In addition to this, opportunity charging also needs to be created at halt points. So all in all, multiple charging methods to be deployed. Not one method would be sufficient in case of the buses. Along with this, we should start the consultations with the industry to phase out all new non-zero emission vehicles in public transport segment. It may be in 2040 or in some other year, but the consultations has to start now for better preparations. Plus, with the deployment of the e-buses at the large level, smart charging becomes inevitable to maintain the grid stability and manage the renewable power generation. This area needs attention, and DISCOM should work with the fleet and the charge point operators to maximize these benefits. Finally, I must say that along with the buses deployment, we need to sensitize the citizens too, so that they start demanding such changes. It should be a pull rather than a push, especially in current post-COVID situation. I think I'll end with these thoughts.
Thanks a lot, Ranveer, very much for your words. Next, I'll come to Ms. Mahua Acharya, CEO of CESL. We briefly spoke about sort of, the three challenges, and I was just curious, how are you thinking about financing? I mean, Aparna briefly mentioned that there have been some conversations on scheme convergence. Also, I think some of the cities, like I know Mumbai is in conversations with World Bank. Chennai has been in conversations with KfW. So are there any thoughts of sort of bringing all of these funders into one pool of financing? So just wanted to hear, what are your thoughts about sort of pulling together financing so that we can support, some of these larger STUs to procure. So yeah, with that. And any other broad comments you want to make in this context? So yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Madhav, and thank you to WRI for having me on this panel. It's good to see so many people and such a rich discussion already. Okay, so to respond to financing, I'll respond to that for now, and then we'll go down the table. We tend to believe that a lot of stuff is in the financing bucket. It's not always about financing the whole bus. And I'm looking at it as a wider need for more differentiated instruments. So yes, of course, we keep hearing that financiers are unwilling or hesitant to finance electric buses. We keep hearing that despite the numbers of buses that are already on Indian roads. We've got a lot of ideas that have come in from OEMs so far in all the discussions on can we egg them towards a priority kind of lending, egg them towards some incentives to lend towards electric vehicles, because that's where the country wants to move towards. So obviously the market signals should try and head in that direction. That will urge and egg the debt financiers in that direction. In terms of equity financing agencies for transportation, we don't have any in the country. I think there's about 2 companies, one that both are very new, and they're a bit alone in the market. It's a great development that equity money has decided to make money in the electric vehicle sector and in buses in particular. It's a very good development. So it's heading in the right direction. But what appears to be completely absent and desperately needed is risk mitigation instruments. I mean, already the discussion has been about subsidy and how do we get past viability. And yes, it's risky, and it still doesn't make economic sense, electric vehicles and buses, without a subsidy dimension to it. But I wish we had more risk mitigation instruments. It's a natural thing to quote unquote help a sector. So if we had a guarantee instrument, it's been used in several things in the past. People are willing to pay a guarantee fee. The trade-off and the change in credit terms, even after accessing a guarantee fee, are exponentially different from the cost of the guarantee fee. And that's proven across the world. So it would be great if we could have something like that. There are some really good examples for example, the Ganga Mission. The Clean Ganga Mission has an agency on top that has the role of organizing lots of things, including contracting and financing and so on. The effect on de-risking is I think a case study to be examined a little bit further, because it puts risks in the right places, because that's just fundamental to financing. So there's a lot of in your note, or perhaps somewhere I heard somebody saying pooling of financing. Can we bring more multilaterals together? For sure, I think we should try and bring multilaterals together. They're all operating under the same much larger objective of financing this transition in mobility. And maybe some multilaterals they can put in the best of their instruments. So I just want to differentiate that every time we say financing, it's not just the movement of capital or the availability of capital, because in fact, capital exists. Getting capital is never really the problem. It's structuring your project to make it viable that's the problem. And sometimes normal economics does not end up giving you a viable project. And normal economics is you can't force people to get into a bus, and you can't force people to pay more than they can pay, and so on and so forth. And you can't get roads to be bigger than they are, and you can't do more than 300 kilometers even if you wanted to. So there are normal limitations there. Until technology prices come down, the role of financing has these other bucket of differentiated instruments that can help. So that's one big chunk, and I hope to be able to do more in that direction and consider and gather a lot of these funds who are willing to give a little bit of a push, multilaterals in particular. Just one other thought that I wanted to comment on. An observation right now is we're not seeing operators as many as we would like to see in a vibrant bus system or across the STUs or across the country. You need operators. And of course, I mean, it sounds obvious, but it goes back again to financing. Many of the operators who have a little bit of experience, or who have all the experience in EVs as much as there is in buses, some have shied away, and this is to do with credit risk of the payer, of the STU and the state. When that happens, you see they've backed off. They are right now behind the OEMs, and we don't know if many operators will come. Today we had a consultation with 9 operators in the company. And outside of questions around technology and whether the battery will make it or not, was this big issue around who is going to pay me and how do I know that I will get paid? It's the whole discussion we have in India in the power sector all the time. And so before this becomes even bigger than it should, we have to sort of think, I don't have the answer now, but it is a glaring bit of a concern that if all the cities in fact managed to get all the buses that they wanted to, we may not actually have as many operators, or as many operators with the skill that is needed. Driving an electric bus and managing the electric bus and incentivizing the operator to do better needs experienced operators, and that will come with more and more and more buses, and that will also come with more and more experience if they get into the business of driving buses around. So I'll stop for now, and would love to hear more from others.
Thank you very much. And I mean, I think the second conversation that you raised on the operators is also extremely critical one. And after the first round of JNURM funding that happened about 10 years ago, we saw a lot of operators sort of emerge at that time, but a lot of them sort of moved away from the business because of the whole sort of payments issue and things like that. And there are some interesting models around that with creation of sort of intermediate trust funds, getting fair collection to directly go into trust funds. So maybe some of those experiences from Latin America we could also hear from one of our panelists later in the conversation. But there are some good examples globally also that we can also try to document around sort of building that guarantee for the operators. So but you raise, 2 very valid questions, and operators also is actually probably the 4th thing after the buses that we should actually put into that list, because, and whether, we can also leverage some skill development, skills and training program to be able to sort of, again, at scale, deploy something that sort of enables this whole digitization, operation, maintenance kind of issue around electric buses. So that's it. Next, I'll go to Mr. Nishant Arya. He's the Vice Chairman of JBM Group. Again, we raise those 3 questions. So for you, I mean, how do you feel, if there was a demand of 100,000 buses, say in the next 7 to 8 years, how do you feel about sort of fulfilling that demand? And really, what do you perceive as challenges? But at the same time, any broad reflections to the FAME 2 notification and the conversation that has happened so far? Thank you.
Sure. So first of all, I must say that the government has acted very proactively in this case. by enhancing the timelines for FAME 2 to FY24 until March 24. Because that gives a clear understanding of the roadmap for the next 2.5 3 years. That's one. Secondly, I think it's very important that any company in the not only in the e-bus space but any EV space looks at the whole ecosystem rather than only a product, because a product doesn't survive on its own. It survives, works with the ecosystem. And if you have a competency only in one area, whether independently or collectively with the collaborative approach of different stakeholders, it's important to understand that how that ecosystem is being put in place for you to see the reality and for the project to be a success eventually. When I talk about the ecosystem, it's essential that clearly in this case, definitely in all the cases, I always compare electric bus segment or any EV to solar energy. What was that 10 years back? Because then started from 18 rupees per kilowatt hour, and those projects are still running for 25 years, where later on many states, many cities had apprehensions, and today we are at 2 rupees. And even a hybrid project with wind comes to 2.3 rupees, but there are still projects running with 18 rupees there. Because that wouldn't have taken off if you would have waited, because it was a chicken neck theory, as the price was high then and now it has come down. I think the point which was mentioned about the gross cost contract, that's a great point, because the gross cost contract gives a clear perspective how things can be structured in a manner where any operator or a OEM or a consortium can clearly operate and work together, where the capex cost is higher, the opex cost is much lower, and they are able to justify that cost. And there the key is for the costs to go southwards, for it to become more competitive, and for the viability gap funding to go down. As Ms. Acharya mentioned about the structuring, I think that is very important. That in that scenario, how companies like us, we are totally committed to the EV segment, working in the EV segment, having dedicated facilities, having the capacity to produce thousands and thousands of buses per annum, being there. But when you are coming to a e-mobility operating mechanism, there certain contractual conditions makes it very important to enhance the bankability of those projects, which drives the whole cost structure for any financial institution, whether in form of debt or equity, to participate along with you. And simultaneously, any other stakeholder for that matter, whether for charging or for battery or for any power infrastructure, which is there in place. So that is most important, that how collectively, when any project is being conceived, we address all these points, which becomes the basis for the project to move forward. We got the opportunity to work across the country. We have worked in Ahmedabad. We have deployed our buses there, as Mukesh Kumarji shared. So we are part of his vision there in Ahmedabad. We are working in Navi Mumbai. We are working in Andaman. We are working in different cities across the country, and nowhere we have tried to give a product we have, because we feel that the EV segment is all about customizing towards customer and as per the requirement of the city and the customer operating mechanism. So I think that is extremely important. And the other point is that how are we able to see that the supply chain gets localized in a given manner, and basis that the time to market for the products to be launched, the products with the uptime they have is very critical. I heard one point about battery. So we produce our own battery packs. We are one of the few OEMs who produce our own battery packs. We import the cells from abroad, but we do our own battery packs, because our perspective is integration across the ecosystem is only what gives us the understanding of the product to be able to give that kind of commitment to any customer, because we have to ensure that service is catering to safety, comfort, and affordability, because that's our way of looking at it, that these are three key elements for any mode of public transportation for end customer, end consumer who is using that product, right? And over and above this, as we heard that every city, I think Ashish ji gave a perspective that how he's looking that in a certain period of time, Delhi is looking for 11,000 buses. Similarly, in other cities, we are seeing multiple buses. If the cities can have a published plan, because the way this kind of vehicles are wearing out, or new vehicles are required because the public transport density has to go up, that would give a clear understanding that in next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, a given city, a year-on-year basis, would be looking to purchase these many number of buses. I don't think that there would be any segment or sector where manufacturers would not want to subscribe to that or work with them, because these are all very credible cities and the best-in-class cities we are referring to here. and putting in the right structure with the volumes in place, I think things can be done in a very good manner. Simultaneously, as we saw in the solar space, initially there were multiple technologies because the structure is always technology agnostic. But then the industry and the segment find its own path forward, and the photovoltaic technology instead of the CSP or many other technologies, especially in the Indian market, took off the most. It was most competitive because eventually you have to understand and see that how competitiveness is driving this, and clearly without disrupting a current operating pattern which a city has, right? So I think these are certain key points which are important. Parallelly, I think another thing which is very critical in this case is that how OEMs are working on a T1 L1 kind of a thing as they move. So technology should be given that kind of relevance in my view, and how we are moving in the right manner, and then we move towards such kind of things. I think in many other areas, few areas, such things have been done very well in, and they have been able to get the very holistic view of such kind of things. Simultaneously, another point which I would like to add here is that how companies, local manufacturing organizations in India are being given that kind of opportunity to work, because idea is that how with this the whole ecosystem can operate. And when I say that, so I'm talking also about skill development, because on one hand we see that there's a dearth of people who are required, on the other hand there's unemployment. How can we put them together and clearly ensure that the requirements are being met through a very holistic view and a training which is being done? Like a company like us, we train about 5,000 plus people every year in our skill development centers. But is that enough? No, it's not. It is probably tip of the iceberg which we are looking for. So clearly, I think certain plans which are maybe having a 3 to 5 year, 7 year horizon, which can capture this, I think would be very important. And that is what would be driving the scale up and bringing the costs down. So, and that will give a clear understanding to different companies across the EV ecosystem, whether the OEMs or the operators or the supply chain in any manner. That's my view.
No, thank you very much. And I think one thing I would, I can say we can volunteer as a team also. I think very quickly, at least for these 10 cities, we can put out an, the sort of vehicles, the contracts, this data is actually available. It just needs to be aggregated. I think something that can be done. Also looking at, what percentage of vehicles are BS3, BS4, because these are likely to get also transitioned first. So we can, even for these 10 cities, at least I think we can fairly quickly aggregate this data and sort of make it available. So I think that is something that you raised, and I think that could be done very quickly. So we'll definitely see how that we can do that. But thank you very much for your comments. Next, I'll go to Dr. Jens. He is currently leading the TUMI Volt, the sort of eBus mission that was shared with you earlier in the presentation. But he also has deep experience of working in Latin America, and we've seen some large procurements in Santiago, in Bogota, Medellin. So I mean, any thoughts on based on this conversation, any sort of learnings you can share with the group based on the experiences you might have come across in Santiago or Bogota, or any of the other larger sort of eBus procurements that have happened in Latin America?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and happy to join this discussion. A lot of topics or arguments here really remind me of the discussion in Latin America. So I have to admit that India is quite new for me. So Rohan, of course, is the one that's more competent regarding this region, my colleague. But yeah, happy to share some insights or some learnings. I mean, the large procurements in Santiago and Bogota, you may know, that happened in the past and that have also ambitious plans for the future, are based on a new model for the operation and the ownership of the e-buses. So it's based on the asset separation, that the operation from the buses is separated from owning the buses. So I believe it has a lot to do with risk mitigation instruments that had been mentioned before, and the question of guarantees. So normally the private bus operators have limited access to capital, have few capital in general, are taking all the risks. So the idea of this new model that has been implemented in Santiago and Bogota, of course, is to share the risk between the different stakeholders, no? Between transport authorities, bus operators, and the owners of the assets, the owners of the e-buses, no? Which are at least in Santiago and Bogota, are large energy distribution companies that are also building up energy recharging infrastructure and other issues. However, I believe that it is important to mention that even in the case of these new models in which you try to share the risk in a different manner, the role of some local or state or national, federal state government is important as well, no? Because all these systems are also struggling with general challenges of public transport systems, a decreasing number of passengers, though normally these systems have to be subsidized as well. And in the case of these models, the federal government also gives some guarantees for these operations. And there's also discussion about creating a national fund to roll out electric buses, not only in Bogota, but beyond Bogota in smaller cities that do not have the same capacity to guarantee these risks and these credits. No? So I believe that there are some learnings that are interesting from these cities when it comes to separating ownership from the operation of the buses. At the same time, the role of state or federal or state governments is important to guarantee that this model really works and the risk mitigation instruments can be implemented. And maybe having a look into another country in which I had been working in the past years, in Brazil, in which we do not have a lot of large-scale deployment of electric buses until now. I believe that one point that is different from between India, Brazil on one side, and Bogota, Colombia, and Chile on the other side is that while Chile and Colombia are not large bus manufacturers, Brazil is also large bus manufacturer, similar to India. And of course, there's also discussion how to increase local content, how to prepare the bus manufacturers. And of course, also this chicken-egg discussion. There's few demands, tenders are being made, but there are few offers or only from one or two companies. So the tenders have to be canceled at the end. There's also a strong discussion on how to build up the supply chain, how to send strong signals that the cities will procure e-buses. And that's exactly where we think that the TUM e-bus mission together with WI and other partners, NITI Aayog from India, can jump in or can help to create this framework with instruments that make it easier to scale up electric buses across the country, across the different regions. So that are maybe some insights or some learnings on comparison here from a completely different context in some ways, but similar discussions, similar challenges, which we maybe can also establish peer-to-peer exchange between these regions to discuss on these potential solutions. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jens. And I think we might come back to you if there are some questions. Next, I will go to Dr. Rajesh Pandya from Surat. Surat is operating 50 e-buses. And Dr. Pandya, I mean, what has your experience been with these 50 buses? What are your plans for procurement? And just any reflections on sort of the discussion so far?
Thank you, Madhav, and thank you, WRI, for making me a part of this discussion. First of all, I'd like to bring to the notice that we have already ordered for 150 buses. These were delayed because of this COVID situation. So we have about around already 50 buses, and another 100 buses will be delivered by the March 2022. We have already initiated a procedure for another 150 buses, and the tenders have been received. We are in the process. So those another 100. So by the end of 2022, we'll be on hand. We'll be having about 300 electric buses. We are at present operating about 750 buses. So they'll be phasing out in the time phase, and we'll be increasing the number of electric buses. Our experience with the buses have been electric buses have been very encouraging, especially not, let us not talk about, I'm not talking other than OEM and other technology part, but the response from people is very positive. people, we have observed increase in ridership along certain routes and certain buses. So people tend to wait for electric bus. If an electric bus is following the conventional bus, they'll tend to wait and try to board an electric bus. And from the passenger feedback that we have received, they feel that first is it is more comfortable and all those things, because maybe it is a new bus, but they still feel that we are sitting in an electric bus, or they have a feeling of compatibility with the upcoming technologies. So that is one observation that we have made. And as for the contract, as Mukesh Kumar sir was also talking about, we should think not of fixed assured kilometers. So the assured kilometer, the more number of kilometers is fixed for a bus, the operating cost goes on increasing, that we are all aware. So why should we always think of higher assured kilometers? We can work on an iteration where we can have some buses with low assured kilometers or low on lesser operating kilometers per charge. This will reduce the cost of operations, and these buses we can use on high during the peak hours on the high frequency routes, so that to have a matrix we can mix the buses with more number of kilometers, operating kilometers, the low number of kilometers. As per the feedbacks we have with the DISCOMs, we are having some technical glitches with the DISCOMs because the non-uniformity of rates and power supplies and overloading of switches also. And as for the operators, as we Ashish sir was also telling about Delhi, we are very much concerned or observant about how the operators are making the operations, because it is an evolving technology. So we don't want to be fixed on our hands some 100 or 500 buses with old technology. A year from now, or maybe say 2 years after this technology will not be as efficient, not seem as efficient as it seems now. We will have higher range buses, more efficient battery packs. So the phase out should be in stage wise, and that is.
I think we lost.
Sir, you went on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
You were.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So we are also working with CESL, how we can have the advantage of their group tendering also. So we are going on to that. It's also with this. As Mukesh Kumar sir has already pointed out, we are getting the advantage of the VGF, the Viability Gap Funding, from the Chief Minister's Urban Bus Scheme, where electric bus is getting a VGF of 25 rupees per passenger kilometer against what we are getting for the conventional buses, which is only 12.5 rupees. So that is an additional advantage that we are having.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now I'll go to Mr. Simon Roberts. He's the technical lead, transport and urban planning at C40. Simon, any reflections on the conversation so far, and any based on sort of all your other experiences, anything you want to add to this whole conversation?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to speak this afternoon. So a couple of points in addition to those that have been raised already. I think on a global level, just really signaling to manufacturers, OEMs, that electric buses are coming, the demand is there, is a very important part in stimulating the market. This is something which we at C40 are doing through our Green and Healthy Streets Declaration. We've got 36 cities globally who have said that from 2025 they will only be buying electric vehicles, no more fossil fuel buses in these cities from 2025. And I think it's just important that's backed up by the right policies, getting the right infrastructure in place, getting the right knowledge, getting the financing right at the city level. Just a couple more things on some of the challenges which people have raised. I think operator is an interesting one, but it's also important that when we talk about operators, we don't just talk about like the managers, the CEO of the operating company. We need to be thinking, what's the impact on the drivers going to be? Are the workforce on board? You know, there's all kinds of advantages of electric buses for the workers. It just needs to ensure that there's sufficient training for drivers. They're more comfortable, they're familiar with the bus services and the way things need to operate differently. And just, I suppose, one more point, perhaps an opportunity.
And also, I mean, you know, I don't know exactly what you did. Simon is actually on a secondment from TFL. And, you know, so if you can briefly also talk about, you know, what is the size of the e-bus operation right now that TFL is running? I know they've recently brought in some hydrogen buses into the fleet. So just, you know, I think that'll be interesting for our audience. So if you can just talk about it for a bit and then reflect. I mean, and TFL has a lot of operators. So, you know, have you done any effort on the point that Maua raised? I mean, did you do any trainings for the operators? Was there, or, you know, just, yeah, would love to hear sort of any reflections.
Yes, sure. So I really need to update my bio because I'm no longer at TFL. I'm permanently at C40, but I can give some reflections on the e-bus operation in London. So London is one of the signatories of Green Healthy Streets Declaration. And what London's also, I think London had possibly the world's first bus garage wholly dedicated to electric buses in Waterloo. And the depot manager there is a very, very forward-thinking man. He's a man that there's challenges, but they're not insurmountable challenges. I think he worked very, very closely with the OEMs when London initially trialed some OEMs from BYD back in about 2012. The feedback wasn't very good because of the way the bus had been designed. So what the operator told the OEM to do was to go back and partner with a European bus manufacturer, so that the BYD supply the battery, the technology, and the bus operator, the OEM in Europe supplies the body. And the feedback on these newer buses from the drivers in particular was a lot better. They were a lot happier with that. Partnerships between the bus operators and the electrical companies has also been an important part of the story, making sure that the grid operator, the distribution operators, they're on board with things, they know what's coming, having the dialogue as to exactly what needs to happen when, and trying to find financing around it. So yeah, it's there are multiple operators within London, and I think the idea is that they all know that this is the direction that London is going in, and it is there's just needs to be plenty of opportunity for them to upskill, to understand the specific challenges isn't necessarily the word, but the specific differences between operating a diesel bus and an electric vehicle bus.
Thank you. So last, I think we'll now go to our last sort of discussant for this conversation, Mr. Vijay Medikonda. He's from Olectra Clean Buses, and he's one of the largest, sort of operates around 350 buses across 10 cities in India. So Mr. Vijay.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for this opportunity to Olectra to represent in this forum. And we thank all other co-speakers, panelists, to cater their time and help the electric mobility to establish in public transport. So this FAME2 extension, FAME2 policy extension is really a very aggressive decision and aggressive thought process that has been put to encourage electric mobility in India, which is a very good initiative. We thank government for this. Also, what we are seeing is that CESL and WRI are very extensively working to collect the data, feedback, visiting depots, traveling in buses, meeting various stakeholders to further bring a very good, policy for electric buses to deploy in public transport. And we request to may kindly extend the scheme for intercity transport also, which is operating, burning more diesel compared to city buses as well.
We lost him.
Madhav, while we get Vijay back, why don't we continue?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of questions that maybe we can that the audience has raised, maybe as a group, if anybody wants to respond. One is there a sort of a precedence of an IFI backed or a federal government guarantee sort of program outside of India for e-bus operations? So I don't know, Mava, if you want to respond to this, or Dr. Jens, if you are aware of any sort of, I'm sure, federal government guarantees.
So you want to?
Hello,
you want to go next? You want to address that, or Madhav, you want me to do it?
Yeah, if you don't mind, and then I think Vijay will come back to you. We just since go ahead. You want.
Precedence of, to be specific, precedence of IFI-based federal government guarantees for buses. There are plenty of government guarantees or guarantees that are government-backed, and that also come with sovereign government backing for several sectors. And it's tried and tested in the energy sector, especially in the off-grid business, and in the earlier days, even in grid-connected power when we didn't have that experience. So the issue is not so much whether the guarantee exists for EVs. The issue is, can we just have a guarantee, because there is enough precedence for how to make a guarantee. Most financial institutions know how to design guarantees. What you need, the data you need to put in is, what is the level of guarantee fee and what is the level of risk acquired from the guarantee holder. So, there isn't precedence in the sense of sovereign backed just for EVs, but there's enough precedence for sovereign backed in several other sectors, and it's not impossible to replicate some of that for the EV sector here. Madhav, I'll go through the other questions while you do the round.
Yeah, a lot of the questions have been also responded to by specific people. So, Mr. Vijay, do you want to? Do you want to just finish what you were saying?
No issue. We can continue with the existing discussion. No issue. Our representation will send it to you, to WR.
Sure. No, I think, why don't you go ahead? Take a couple of minutes. I think we just started with questions because we lost you for a moment. So why don't you finish what you were saying, and then we will continue the questions.
So these are few inputs how to further make electric buses cost effective. To go ahead with higher assured kilometers. Year on year, assured kilometers may be reduced. That's why if any officer who is currently working in STU today may not be able to forecast for next 10 years. So year-wise assured kilometer system may be followed, as rightly mentioned by Dr. Pandya sir from Surat Municipal Corporation. This could be followed to assure higher assured kilometer, which will help to reduce the cost, and to prefer electric buses to operate in higher revenue routes, to prefer electric buses to run in longer routes, to also consider electric buses in routes which can be connected to the urban, semi-urban routes also. And one more thing, what we have to understand, sir, in this entire STU ecosystem, you are deploying electric buses which are having very, very, very higher features, electric, like air suspension, disc brakes, air condition, whereas the replacement is happening for non-premium segment buses. So we cannot compare the rates between non-premium segment buses with premium electric buses. This is one thing we have to understand, and we have to make also the STUs to understand. We cannot compare every time that way. And coming to how does this electric buses optimization in public transport in India, definitely yes, preference for going for nighttime charging, which helps the grid to stabilize the grids, to stabilize the grid. And if any benefits have been by virtue of charging the buses in night times, may be provided to the public transport corporations. And because of having charged these buses in night time, the higher availability of buses in daytime will help the uptime of the buses for public transport. Like these are few sessions, and if we rightly see, few years back, Volvo has introduced AC premium buses in the country, which were a game changer. Not many four-wheeler personal transport commutters have shifted to the Volvo buses. Similar kind of momentum we need to bring in electric buses also. And the new opportunities that that will reduce the congestion on the roads with this entry of electric buses in public transport, which will help the STUs to bring more traction towards electric buses. Majority of the commuters may shift from existing transport to the public transport. This is all from our end on behalf of Electra. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And so I think there is another broad sort of set of questions around retrofitment, which I think may be a different conversation. I don't know if you anybody wants to respond to that, but maybe we could separately set up a conversation, Pawan, on just retrofitting the existing fleets and some of the opportunities and challenges. As an organization, we have been also involved in sort of pilot testing a retrofitted bus in partnership with BMTC. And there are some, it was a BS3 bus. So there's some learnings, challenges from that. Again, it is not yet in commercial operation. It is still being tested with sandbags. And I think that's a larger conversation. So maybe we could think about a separate conversation around retrofitment. So let's park those set of questions. Other than that, I think some of the sort of specific questions that came along the way, various speakers have responded to them during the conversation. So Mahua, I think I'll pass the floor back to you. Any sort of overall reflections on the conversation so far, and again, what are some of the next steps you think we can take, just in terms of sort of moving the conversation forward, and any other reflections?
Sure, thank you, Madhav. I think I'll put them into two buckets. There's things that we have to do now, meaning in the short term. And then things we should actively as a community, and I think WRI is perfectly placed with all your experience over the years and currently perfectly placed to constantly maintain an eye on the ball to get to a certain direction. In the short term, our job here right now our objective is to deploy as many electric vehicles on Indian roads as possible. That's the overall objective. We try to do that with as much financing solutions that we have that we have available today, as much of access and conversation and dialogue as we can get. And so I would in fact go back and urge STUs that in an effort to do, I think it was Dr. Pandya who was saying group procurement, we're looking at homogenizing the demand. And what that means is, and the implications of that is sometimes STUs will have to sort of give up some of their favorite conditions in the larger objective of getting a better price and being part of a bigger club. That's a short-term objective. And to do that, we're going STU by STU and trying to understand their needs and seeing how far they can, in fact, are willing to aim to get to this so-called grand challenge and its benchmark conditions. And in order to do that, perhaps drop some of their issues that are a little bit more difficult to achieve. And so far, I think I can report the progress has been extremely encouraging. And I'm so happy to say that many STUs and transport ministers are willing to make that one extra step. So that's something that we have to do in the short term. Now, in the longer term, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and I say this because the so-called long term is 8 months and 12 months, not 5 years, because I feel that we'll miss the boat if we don't do this in the next 1 or 2 years, is we don't focus enough on thinking a little bit holistically. I know it sounds cliche to say that, but every time you get into the detail, you're stuck, quote unquote, stuck at charging infrastructure, tariffs, small issues. And the eye on the ball just means that I think maybe it was Nishant Arya from JBM. I think he may be the person saying that these products work inside this ecosystem. Everyone knows that. Now, dealing with the ecosystem has to sort of come up at the same level of priority that we are dealing with getting the buses on the road and the capex of the buses and the structuring and the risk mitigation and the finance. But in fact, really, we need all of these other things to come around it. A scrapping value would be excellent, would give a signal to the manufacturers, would give a signal to the operator. Charging stations, locating of these charging stations, making sure there's enough current going through it, making sure the infrastructure, even if it doesn't exist, that we have some clarity on who will pay for that infrastructure. So if we can just, in the interest of a larger good, sometimes just come to a standard sheet to say, well, these 9 lighthouse cities, or as far as buses are concerned, or whichever STUs have EV plans, also sort of subscribe to this larger chunk of things that need to be done. And these chunk of things that need to be done are small, and each of them appears to have a veto right on the larger objective. If I don't have a charging station, the cost goes up. The cost goes up, it doesn't become viable, and they're not able to get to that EV. And not having it done for 5 buses means you can't probably get it done for 100. So each has a pretty serious impact on the larger objective. So I would, in fact, urge and request WRI and others that if you can continue to sort of keep an eye on the ball and the focus on the charging infrastructure and everything that goes into the business of charging infrastructure. It's not just the stations, of course. With 2 other things that we have to, I know that we are and we have to continue working on it. One, of course, was finance. We mentioned that. Operators, we mentioned briefly, is skill development. I feel that, again, as we look around, this is skill driving. It is skill technology. There are offshoots, and every time there's a new market, you have new products and new companies coming up. So there's new value that's being created. The technology business, the business of apps, the business of GPS-based locators and monitors and tracking systems. So I think we have to somehow keep that in mind, that skill development. And if we could just in the short term focus a little bit on perhaps training drivers. I mean, I'm no expert. OEMs themselves who have the experience working in these STUs, operating these buses, will know much better on what exactly is needed. Is it a certification course? Is it telling driving schools that they have to operate a driving course for EVs? What is it? I mean, but we should try and get there, because we will have, it's a huge labor market there, and it's a slightly more skilled labor market, starting at labor market, going all the way up to higher skill technology solutions. So back to the short term, I would we're still working with STUs, and we're looking forward to them signing up to this grand challenge, and we'll see where we come out.
Thanks a lot, Mo, for sharing that, and really looking forward to a lot of STUs coming on board on this exercise. Any last comments from any of the other speakers before we close? I mean, we are at time, but maybe if you have any last comments to add, otherwise we can say thank you to all of you and close this session. So.
Just a point from my side, Madhav. I think we've had a very good discussion. If you could channelize this and see that all the concerns and all the points which come out of each of these stakeholders can be put together, and we can have a follow-up on this, how this can really materialize into actions and results, bringing all stakeholders on board. I think that could be quite meaningful for the whole ecosystem. That was number 1. Number 2 from my side was that I clearly see that certain interministerial activities are involved in this, whether we talk about DHI, we talk about Ministry of Power, we talk about EPINARI, we talk about skill development, multiple segments. If we could correlate and bring some kind of a common group, interministerial group, or some kind of group which can be created so that the stakeholders are there, that will really help all stakeholders to expedite the whole process and have their skin in the game and have utmost clarity for driving things forward. This is just an opinion from my side.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any sort of parting thoughts?
Sorry, Madhav, I'd like to add one thing. I agree with Nishant, sir, that we should share our experiences, especially where there have been some mistakes or errors We always try to share our success stories, but we should also try to share our failures. Where in the clause, I think some cities are very way ahead. Mukesh sir and Delhi, Mumbai, they are very ahead. They are with their contracts, with their operations of buses. So where they think they should pose a word of caution to cities like us who are coming up, where we should tread carefully, what contracts or what certain clauses we should try to avoid, or we should be cautious when we are dealing with that. So we should also share the experience, especially the pitfalls or the danger points which they are. So whenever we are coming up, so we should be cautious and we have a better system with the data sharing. And I thank Mahua also for her very intelligent feedback. Thank you.
Great, good. So thank you very much. And Nishant, we'll definitely agree with you. We will set up follow-up conversations building on what we have heard today, and also sort of diving deeper into some of these issues to get more specific, and also the whole idea of sort of bringing together the
because in the past also we've had some very good discussions with Pawan also on different platforms where we have engaged and done, and a lot of good work happens in the background, but eventually it's important that it see the light of the day. So that's critical. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, everyone. Panelists, attendees, thank you very much for your time and for this very engaging conversation. And this is to hoping that India has at least 10,000 e-buses in the next 3 to 4 years operating, and too many more in the years to come. Aparna, any final words before we close, or should we?
No, we can close right now, but I would request all the panelists who are present right now to switch on your video so that we can probably take a picture as well. And thank you all for joining in today, and all the participants who have been sending a lot of questions. We are collating all the questions, and as Nishant mentioned, we'll also be sharing a brief of what has been discussed right now as well. So yeah, thank you all for joining in. And 1 second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you
Bye,
very much.
everyone.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.